All right, so this content is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any such information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. Nothing contained on here constitutes a solicitation, recommendation, endorsement, or offer by Draper Goren Holm or any third-party service provider to buy or sell any securities or other financial instruments whatsoever. And we have an awesome media partner that we kind of distribute this stuff to afterwards. Blockchain Radio, we love them. And you can also check out our pre-recordings and all the other Blockchain and Booze on our YouTube channel, obviously. And today's topic, we're talking all about the music industry and royalty payments, distribution, all that fun stuff that comes with all of that. So let's kind of go around and introduce our speakers. Andre, why don't you go ahead and start, and then we'll go to Forrest and Roneil.
Yeah, so hey, Andre Andros, I make music as RAC. I've been sort of involved in the music industry professionally since 2007. I've done a million different things. I've been a remixer, I've been a film scorer, I've written for TV, I've written for a ballet, I've won a Grammy. I've done a lot of things over the years. More recently, I've been very interested in sort of pursuing, basically like anything Ethereum or blockchain related to the music industry, because I see it as sort of a very disruptive technology for the better and in favor of the artists, which has sort of been a very long time coming. So that's like super quick, but yeah, that's my role in all of this.
Awesome. And what kind of music do you create?
It's interesting because like that's such a difficult question to ask somebody. Like in my mind, I feel like I make a lot of things, but I think generally people categorize it as electronic pop. So
nice.
Somewhere in that world. It's vague enough. I think it's
perfect. Okay, Forrest, go for it.
Cool. Yeah. So let's see. Interesting kind of backstory. So I guess kind of where this started is I met Roneil way back when, end of high school. We were at some like nerdy kind of computer science camp way back in the day. I don't know, ended up going to Stanford to study computer science along with Roneil actually. And then let's see, probably in the middle of college, give or take, Roneil and I were kind of like power users of SoundCloud and other services like that. So, it was kind of like this long-standing love and like, deep history and kind of like power using SoundCloud and Hype Machine and these other sort of like electronic services. And then let's see, when I graduated from Stanford, I ended up actually founding a far less interesting business. It was enterprise data center management. So we would basically exactly possibly imagine. So it was basically helping like large Fortune 500 companies do like application analytics and like optimizing their spend and things like that. We'd raised a couple $1 million from like Greylock and Lightspeed, folks like that in Silicon Valley. So just the timing worked out there, but. Ran that for about 2.5 years. We grew that to about a dozen people, and then sold that in late 2017, which is kind of the time that Roneil and I were able to finally start working on Audius.
Nice. And Roneil, last but not least.
Yeah, so hey everyone, I'm the other co-founder of Audius, and I guess like to introduce quickly what Audius does, it's a decentralized audio hosting and streaming protocol. Think like kind of like a decentralized SoundCloud. We help artists connect directly with fans and distribute anything they want. My backstory is I kind of have worked as a software engineer for a long time, and then ended up finding my way into venture capital for a little while. So me and a couple of others started the seed practice at a firm called Kleiner Perkins, and our group was called KPCB Edge within that. And I was covering crypto for them and made some investments in that time, like in Lightning Labs, the Lightning Network company, and a few others. Kind of have been in and around crypto for a long time, but also in and around kind of music mostly from the fan side. Forrest and I used to just go hit electronic shows in San Francisco every weekend when we were at Stanford. So that was how our kind of friend group like really kind of came together. So we started Audius in early 2018, and here we are now. I guess it's been 2.5 years of hard work, and I think we have another like 15 years to go before we can maybe like finish making our dent in the world. But we're pretty excited about things and excited to get to chat with all of you all too.
Nice. I love it. And just to drop this out, everybody that's watching, make sure to post your Q&A in the last tab. We'll be answering some of that at the end. And Andre, I want to be respectful of your time because you only said you have until about 5:30, so 20
I
minutes.
actually have a little bit of wiggle room, so we're totally good there. I have, by the way, I'm streaming at 6 p.m. if anybody wants to jump over there after.
Yeah,
so
throw the link in there. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, so that's all I got. So I just need a couple minutes before that.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it. So
yeah, no rush on my end. We're good.
Okay, cool. So just to kick things off, okay, what does the business of being a musician kind of look like today versus 10, 20 years ago? And I'm throwing this question out there, Roneil, Forrest, Andre, feel free to jump in and kind of break it down. But what did it look like?
Yeah, so I guess I can speak maybe from personal experience because I've had a somewhat unique path in that I didn't take the typical track, but I am pretty aware of like what it typically was. So in let's say 2005, 2006, the typical track that you did as an artist is that you would basically try to like record a demo of some sort in a studio. You'd pay, I don't know, anywhere from on the low end $1,500 to maybe $20,000, to come up with this demo basically, and then you would approach essentially a label with this demo and try to pitch it to them as if it's like, hey, do you want to have me basically re-record this in a proper studio and sign like a record contract, which is traditionally very lopsided, to put it lightly. So the whole approach was you had to always go through a label if you wanted to get promotion. The sort of general label system controlled most of the outlets and the distribution, even in 2005, 2006. I mean, we're talking about the MySpace era. So even then, it was like a very kind of, you had to work with a company. There wasn't really an independent track. There wasn't, even SoundCloud didn't exist. You had to host your own MP3s. There wasn't really a viable path as an independent artist that didn't involve a label or a middleman in some form or fashion. And we've obviously come a long ways since then.
Cool. Roneil, Forrest, you guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think neither of us are artists, so you should, take what we say with a big fat grain of salt because we haven't done this. Yeah, I do think it's I definitely agree with everything Andre said. The one little bit I would add is I think the digitization of music and kind of the ease with which it's possible to publish and get broad distribution of your music has definitely changed the rules of engagement in a way that I think we're still grappling with 20 years later as an industry and as a community, right? I mean, anyone in their bedroom can produce things that are of a level of quality that someone spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on production equipment can do, right? And when you combine that ability with the ability to broadcast and reach potentially millions or hundreds of millions of people for free as well, the way that artists kind of develop themselves, I think, is just very, very different. But I do think one of the frustrations and one of our hopes that we have an opportunity to rectify a bit with Audius is that this world of digital abundance has, I think, also led to the cheapening of digital music, right? And there's no reason why music should be thought of as background noise, right? This is something that people put their lives into, and we should be treating it with the level of respect that it deserves.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to add to that is I feel like, yeah, to your point, in 2001, with the creation of Napster, it really changed everything, right? And I guess in that process, the reaction was so harsh against it because it's like, oh no, the world's imploding, and it's almost like the thing that they were solving for was piracy, when piracy wasn't really the problem. The problem was that the failure of the music industry to deliver what people actually wanted, what the consumer wanted. I don't think the consumer expected to get everything for free, but because of their reluctance to embrace this technology, it sort of cheapened music as an asset or as a product, if you want to think about it that way. So we've been fighting that ever since, where even now, I mean, even Spotify is priced objectively as like through the ad-based model and through all this stuff, basically free. You know, people think of music as being free. Right. And we've been fighting that notion for a long time now. And so it's, you know, that's sort of been the struggle of the past 20 years, is basically fixing what the industry failed to do in 2001.
Yeah. And to kind of build on that, I mean, at least kind of from what we've heard from artists, right, is like, because of that kind of debundling and almost like devaluing of these per stream models, it seems like artists more and more are relying on touring, right? Touring, like relying on shows, because it's so damn hard to make any money via the streaming models right now. And of course, in a COVID world, that puts artists, you know, really backed into a corner. And, you know, I think there are a lot of very interesting things that are coming out of that.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about the live touring side of it, because I actually think it's one of the more competitive sides of the music industry, where we actually are able to value ourselves more properly. Mm-hmm. And it's no surprise to me that we're able to capture like 80% of income comes from live performance, because it's actually competitive. Whereas with recorded music, it's anti-competitive. We have, you know, basically 3 incumbent players that control the entire music industry, and sort of get to set the rates for everybody. So that's obviously something that Audius is trying to change, and that's why I'm like stoked about it. But it's that's kind of where we're at, where it's like, this is the progress we've made, is like we're still dealing with you know, an ad-based model that doesn't make any sense for music, and just this like fixed price with streaming services. It doesn't make any sense.
Right. And Andre, just to piggyback off that, I kind of want to dive into your journey, because I find it really unique. You come off as a very like business oriented, like really sharp, right? You know what you're doing. You're looking at things from a holistic perspective as an artist, right? You're tampering with different technology, and I find that really unique about you, right? And you're no stranger to crypto, Ethereum specifically, right? You're the first to use this decentralized network to release your full album, Ego, right? Is it EGO? Ego?
Yeah,
right?
It's Ego, yeah.
Ego. And now you have your own token, right? And I haven't seen any artists kind of take this perspective. Kind of walk me through your journey and your thought process with doing something like this. Why do you need your own token? We don't have to dive obviously into the price and stuff like that. I kind of want to pick your brain a bit. Like, why did you decide to do something like this?
Well, it's interesting because like I find it kind of crazy that other people aren't trying this, because it's so obvious to me. And okay, so like, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, but basically, like when I discovered Ethereum, or really just crypto in general, you know, the thing that I gravitated towards was digital scarcity, because in 2001 we saw that the lack of digital scarcity created this, it kind of changed the whole model, right? Because you could argue that in you know, before that, in vinyl and CDs, there was still some level of scarcity. You know, there's still some cost of producing. You couldn't just copy it infinitely. So anyway, so this idea of digital scarcity was really interesting. I saw this talk of like Vitalik Buterin talking about Ethereum. I was like, this is like the coolest thing ever. Like we can, you know, we'll be able to fix everything. Like no more middlemen. This is going to be awesome. And then I quickly realized, like, oh, we are so early. Like, like none of this is really built out. All the potential is there. It's just nothing's built yet, basically. Or like, you know, in my case for music, there was Ujo, which shout out to Jack in the chat. He was involved with that project, and like one of the few players that was really basically trying to challenge the infrastructure level side of the music industry. And I just thought it was fascinating, and I reached out and I was like, hey, I have an album. Let's just put it like basically in a smart contract where if you deposit X amount of Ether, you get an IPFS link in return. So you get like basically a direct to fan kind of interaction, about as close as you can get, you know, like it's me, the content creator, giving you the thing that you're paying for directly. There's no PayPal. There's no.
Right.
I mean, so it. To be honest, it was more of a conversation piece and more of an example, and just like trying to, talk about these things because nobody else was even thinking that way. So we fast forward a couple years. Eventually with the token thing, it's a little bit different, but so in the midst of COVID, I'm now live streaming. I'm doing like all these different things, and I think there's sort of a general trend of people moving to smaller social networks, and instead of all focusing on Twitter, you're more in Discord, or you're more in these smaller subsets that are a little more personal. And that started to happen with me, where suddenly I have, built up fans over 10 years plus, and these people, are starting to, kind of like, they were always there, but they never really interacted with each other. And once they started talking to each other, they found a lot more stuff in common. So now suddenly I have, Patreon subscribers and Twitch subscribers that are talking to each other, hanging out. They're making like memes and Discord and like all this stuff. And there's sort of a community that emerged out of it. We kind of jokingly call it a cult, but it's kind of it's loosely around my music, but it's more just it's about that crew. And my whole idea was, especially watching DeFi over this summer, was governance tokens, or not governance, but like tokens in general are sort of like back in a way, where like in 2017 they were a little bit like, it's like, oh,
Like
okay,
a gray area
it
kind
was
of
like
thing. Yeah.
it was basically a fundraising vehicle,
Yeah.
and that's fine. But like I feel like this year it was more like, look at all this other stuff we can do with it. And my whole approach was, let me create sort of a community token around this community and give ownership to the people that are participating in it.
Yeah.
And it's perhaps surrounding me to some extent, but it's not just me, So I feel like I could go on and on about
Yeah.
this.
So just
that's kind of the main point. Yeah.
Yeah. So two quick questions just to quickly follow on that. So where do your fans play a role in this, right? Would you say like a lot of your listeners are from the crypto community, or do you have more of that like mass crowd, that a lot of the general music industry taps into? Like how do your fans kind of like play a role with this stuff?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the vast majority of my fan base is not crypto native at all. In fact, like when I post stuff on Twitter, they're just like, okay, all right, I think they're getting more interested in it now because I've sort of talked about it a lot, and I just love this kind of stuff, so I inevitably talk about it a lot, and so they're starting to get into it. But vast majority of people are non-crypto natives, never even heard about this stuff, probably thought a lot of it was a scam, and so it takes a little bit of education, but this token in itself is sort of a way to bridge that gap and experiment and try things that are like easier for non-crypto natives to interact with this stuff, because I think once you see the light, you kind of see how cool this can be and like what you can do with it. And there's the other side of it that I want to talk about, which is the sort of social glue, the stickiness around a token that like we've definitely seen in crypto projects, we've definitely seen in DeFi, where the example that I like to give is like if people get this excited around a decentralized exchange, like imagine when you apply that to like something cultural, that's not financial in nature, that's more just about a group of people. Like I think there's sort of this kind of stickiness to it that's pretty interesting, that you don't really see on other social networks, and that is kind of how I see it, like a social network kind of on top of all other social networks.
Yeah.
So it's like we're using them, not them using us. So anyway, that's a lot of ideas, but that's the general kind of thing.
I love it. So now more for Forrest and Roneil. Okay, so Joe Rogan, I'm a big fan of his, so I love to name drop him. So he had Kanye West recently on his podcast discussing various things, technology, the music industry. But he kept mentioning how artists right now are raped, as he says, right? what does that mean exactly? Artists are being raped, right? And how do you guys kind of envision a music industry that puts the artist first without really compromising the content and their creativity?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off on
Yeah.
this one. So, like, I mean, put simply, like, artists, the music industry as a whole generates about $43 billion a year in revenue, but artists only capture 12% of that, which is like insane, right? If you think about like all of the kind of like value creating activity in that tool chain is coming from a group that's only capturing 12% of that value, right? So like, I wouldn't use such graphic words to describe it, but like I mean I agree with the sentiment, right? And the approach that Audius is trying to take to really rectify that is to create a free market around streaming and around distribution of content. So like as an artist, our stance is like you should have the right and the freedom to set your own streaming rate. You should be able to define even like how is your content unlocked, right? Like maybe it's if you hold enough RAC tokens, for example, you can like access certain content that RAC puts out. Maybe it could be, there's so many different ways that like artists have never had a chance to explore, like kind of, managing content and gaining access to content or things like this. I think the frustration that we've had is that the sort of, the rise of streaming, while it provided like a much better alternative, I think, for like consumers with digital music than had ever existed previously, it really hasn't led to like equitable outcomes for artists, right? If you think about the dramatic reduction in cost of like producing music, distributing music, all of those gains have been captured by like these middlemen that sit between the artist and that listener. So like Audius is really a simple approach to this set of problems, which is to say like we give artists to distribute anything they want to their fans and then like manage access to it how they want. And what we think the emergent property from that will be this kind of like free market for audio content, right? Where anyone can set their rate. And, as a fan, if you don't want to listen to that's fine too, right? Like it's sort of there's just fans and artists meeting directly with one another on equal or I guess on transparent terms, right? Rather than kind of going through this network of middlemen that sit between the artist and the fan at the end of the funnel.
Yeah, and I do think, I mean, kind of what Kanye was talking about in that podcast. I mean, it was a fantastic podcast. I was actually listening to it over the weekend, right? And like, I think, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily use those exact words, but I mean, at the end of the day, right, like the music industry still uses these very interesting and frankly kind of sketchy, like almost robber baron-esque tactics, right, from the 20s and 30s and 40s. Like these are things that like feel like they've been around like 60 to 100 years. Like no other industry still operates that way, right? Like almost everybody in the past 20 or 30 years, you've had digitization come through, you've had transparency come through, and at one point or the other, basically value either got pushed up the stack or pushed down the stack, right? So either like the platform itself or the end like artist like creating the value would start to capture more of that value. But like music industry, if anything, especially the past decade, has started to amass more and more of this power, and it's like for them it makes sense, right? The incentives are aligned. Like they enjoy when there's this black box in the middle where $1 comes in and 12 cents gets kicked out to the artist, and it's like, oh, what happened to 88% of that money? Well, we don't really know. It all kind of got eaten up, and like, don't worry about it, right? Like they actually value and they create actual like revenue from this sketchiness and this black box and this lack of transparency, which frankly for any other industry has been modernized.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to another point about the free market side of it, I think a lot of people don't realize this, that we don't currently have a free market in music. It's set by very few companies, and it's the way that I like to describe it, sort of opt in or opt out. It's binary in nature. So you either accept it or you don't. And so it's, what are you going to do? Like, I sort of have no choice but to put my stuff up on Spotify because I have, I don't know, a couple million people that want to listen to it every month. So it's like, I kind of have to participate, but what Audius is doing is sort of opening up the other option, which is that we get to set our own rates. Like maybe that doesn't mean every single song is priced the same. Maybe there's like a free one, and then a couple other ones are priced higher. I don't know. Like I don't know what the right model is, but I think what the right direction to head to is more experimentation, more variety. This is a user experience problem. Not like that's what needs to be fixed. It's not like the fixed price model does not work. It's just not working. I know a lot of artists, and I don't know a single one that's happy with this. So like, I don't know what else I can say about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, how do you kind of approach pricing a stream, right? How do you put a value on that? So like, let's say, I don't know, you just hit the #1 song on Billboard, okay, across the world, you're topping all the charts. Can you like, is the stream amount variable, for example? Is it a fixed amount, right? And how, like, why would you, not why, but what's kind of like the thought process of increasing the price of listening to your music, right? So how have you seen people approach this right now? And how do you guys kind of approach that right now?
Well, the one thing I'll say like real quick is I'm, again, this is sort of like a user experience problem. Like I foresee the way that this might work is basically where you pay a subscription fee and that money gets split in between the artists that you listen to in that time period. That to me seems the most equitable way to determine a value, like through a market of like, so if you listen to 40,000 songs, it'll just get split in between those 40,000. But if you listen to 10 songs, they'll get $1 each, you know, for example. I'm oversimplifying, but that's the general idea. Because I think the play count is a terrible measure of value. So like somebody that listens to it in the background is not getting the same value as somebody that's listening to it intently. And that's the only album they listen to that month. That's my whole thesis. But again, like the whole idea is just to open this up, you know.
So let's dive in a little bit deeper. How can you actually differentiate whether someone is listening to it in the background or right is actually like laying in bed, lights are off, you know, with headphones and like experiencing the music?
Right. Like I don't know that it makes sense to get that granular with it. I'm sort of just like just
yeah.
Like it's more like an example of to show that not everybody gets the same value out of the play count. So more like the play count is not a good measure of that. I feel like if we start enforcing, like, it's like, are you listening to the song intently? You know, like, there's no way to really do that, right?
I
just
think
like a question appears mid-song, like, are you there? Are you listening?
Pricing actually implicitly kind of does this, right? Like, if you, I think what we see is that, you know, artists often want like a lot of their core catalog to be free, right? It's like a means of marketing to like bring more fans into their funnel, right? Like, you know, but like maybe once a fan is like a big fan of yours, like they would have a higher propensity to pay for like more exclusive experiences and exclusive content and things like that, right? And if you had to spend more to listen to a given piece of content, well, one, fewer people would listen to it, but two, like the people who do listen to it would have like a level of financial investment in the activity of listening to it that is quite different, right? You know, so I think that's, you know, that's where this gets like really, really interesting. But I couldn't agree more, Andre, with what you mentioned around the user experience and usability side of it. That's like the most important, you know, that's the only way this model will actually work, right? I don't think a user is going to want to like know what they're paying like every time they play something or listen to something or whatever. But I do think there are ways to kind of you know, basically allow for more freedom in terms of like setting of rates around content, and like, you know, allow that content to be made available or surface to the right person at the right time accordingly, right? According to that.
And I mean, I do think that is kind of this user experience problem, right? And that's like something we spend so much time thinking about with Audius, because at the end of the day, it all ties back to that. And there's this tension between how much do you annoy the user and how much are you just kind of like handling things in the background, but handling it in the background means that there's slightly less transparency, right? And like, I think that's something that the crypto as a whole has kind of started to mature around and understand a little bit better, right? Like, back in 2017, 2018, it was like, oh, of course you're fine like hitting a MetaMask like accept button every single time you play a track, right? But like there's a reason why Spotify and Facebook and Instagram don't do this kind of thing. Because if you do that, if you annoy the user, maybe they like 2 or 3 posts and then they get the hell out because it's annoying, right? So like how do you, at the end of the day, make it so those folks stay around and give as much value to the artists as possible, while at the same time like empowering those artists and letting them have choice? And it is kind of interesting. Like, I don't think we have to totally pretend like this is a completely untested theory that only crypto or crypto for the first time will start to do. Like, I think there are a lot of parallels we can do that we can enable with crypto. But like, think about Patreon, right? Patreon did this. There's a way where you can have super fans and monetize those folks by giving them extra experiences, extra value, exclusive things before they're available to everybody else on the network. So there's have like a tier system in which different folks pay different, amounts for different experiences. I think that's probably the best way to do it.
I just wanted to piggyback off the Patreon thing because I can give you a very concrete example that I live with every day. So I have 2.4 monthly unique listeners on Spotify. That's 2.5 million people that listen to my music. That's not like songs. There's like people. And I make more money from 100 people on Patreon than I do from those 2.5 million. So I hope that paints a picture. Like
that's insane.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay. So this one's more again for Forrest and Roneil. So you guys had a big announcement yesterday. And Decrypt reported that you guys had sent 50 million audio tokens to your top 10,000 artists and fans. Okay. That's amazing. I kind of want to dive into that, and we don't have to kind of get into the tokenomics of it or whatever it may be, but what was the strategy and the intent of Audius to do something like this? Why airdrop? Why airdrop that to so many people?
Yeah, so last Friday, Audius officially launched the mainnet version of the network. So prior to that, we've been operating in this sort of testnet capacity. And as part of that Genesis sort of event, right, like the deployment of the set of smart contracts that control this thing, the system actually granted those 50 million audio tokens out to the top 10,000 accounts on Audius. So most of those were artists, but there also were a number of folks who were like curating playlists or like reposting a lot of content or curating content. So there were different ways to kind of get to participate in that. Like it really, I guess it just, when you kind of put it in the context of our broader mission, it just was like, it becomes almost like very obvious that we would want to do something like this, which is like we believe very strongly that artists need to own their own means of distribution. Like as much as we can sit here and try to make good choices as like the project team that's building the first version of this, ultimately for this like sort of system network to sustain itself long term is for like the folks who are creating value in the system to actually own the system as well, right? I think this community ownership bit is like a really, really important thing that we're going to see a lot more of in crypto. This in our case, like this was always sort of the vision that we were working towards. And there's still more work for us as like a community around Audius now to do going forward. But that's the cool part about this, right? Is like this is now like Andre's as much as it is like anyone else's, right? Or like just all of the creators who've built up, so Audius has over 130,000 tracks now, 40,000 plus artists on the platform. Like they're the ones who made this useful and interesting, not like us sitting here and building stuff, right? Like if we built stuff that no one used, it wouldn't matter, right? So right. I think that's what got us really excited about this. And Forrest, I'm sure we'll have a lot to add there too.
No, I mean, I think that was perfectly put, right? Like, it's not just a team of 13 of us in San Francisco or distributed across the U.S. anymore, right? Like, it's us plus 10,000 artists. Like, all of a sudden, it is fully kind of a co-op at this point, right? And like, I think all of us together are what kind of moved this thing forward.
Yeah, and this is basically unheard of, to the point where people, that's the other thing with like artists and really just kind of users of social media in general. They're not used to this concept of equity. right? Like it's feels foreign. It's like, well, what do you mean I own the protocol? Like, well,
and how do you explain that to someone, right?
Yeah.
How do you explain to someone that just loves Ariana Grande, and just wants to enjoy her music? Like, how do you explain, no, now you have some ownership in the platform that you listen to? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I know it's a tricky thing. I think there's a bit of education there, but also like I think we should own the platforms that we use. Traditionally they're captured by the teams and the VCs and all that, and like I'm not going to advocate to say that like that it should be only the users that own it, but like I think there's a give and take. I think it may breed like a better community if they're sort of invested in it in that way, maybe not financially, but just by user. If you own a piece of it, you might be more compelled to give honest feedback and help improve it. Like, I don't know. It just, that seems to be the general correct direction to go to,
Yeah. I love it. I'm really,
Yeah, and in our case, it actually, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it actually serves the function of securing the network too. That's the interesting part. So like all of these artists sort of engaging with the token, staking with it, using it to unlock features within the system, it actually like helps make the network more resilient to a lot of different things, but it also makes the network stronger. So what's really interesting here is you can almost like, it's sort of like a really unique situation, or not so unique. I think this applies to a lot of like network-based systems, but like you can really like actually like grow the pie for everyone and like continue to grow that over time by like bringing, enfranchising more people with like power within the system, right? It's kind of this counterintuitive, like the more people have control over the system, the more powerful it can be, which I think has been really, really cool to see.
Sure. Yeah, I love it. I mean, this topic is near and dear to my heart. I know within Draper Gordon Home, we're all musicians. I'm a drummer. I've been playing since I've been a little kid. Alon, one of the partners, he's a punk artist. Like, he's been in punk bands, screamo bands as a teenager. And Joseph just casually plays the drums on a weekly basis at his house, right? So this whole topic is super important, and considering how prevalent music is in everyone's life, it'd be interesting to see how this concept kind of develops over the coming years, right? And specifically for artists, right? So for any current or up and coming artists that are creating content, creating music, whatever it may be, right? What would be that word of advice as they navigate the trenches of the industry, right? There's all this new tech appearing, all these new equity sharing models. Like, how do you explain this to someone, and how do you entice them? What should they be looking for as they publish their next song, for example?
So that is one thing that I can kind of add some light to. So going back to almost those like robber baron kind of sketchy tactics that are kind of industry norm right now, like this isn't just me saying this, right? There are A&R people that will actively just scout certain neighborhoods and certain clubs and just cut 50K advances or 100K advances to folks that are coming off that look like they're coming up. And the problem is, as soon as you sign that contract, you've made sort of a deal with the devil, right? You're on that kind of hamster wheel, and it's really tricky to get out from underneath that, because then all of a sudden you got $100,000, which is more money than you've ever had before in your life as an 18-year-old kid. But then, it happens to take $200,000 or $500,000 to like, pay for the studio time, pay for the, marketing, all this kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, like, you never recoup that. Then it's like, I'll put out the next, EP to cover that. It just, I don't know. It's kind of interesting, right? Like, just if you're 18 or 19 and getting a check, there are always strings attached. There's no such thing as a free lunch, at least historically. And I think that's what young kids kind of need to understand.
Yeah, I would say definitely avoid the major labels. Definitely, I'll just say that. Fine. I, as a person that signed a deal with a major label, I can say that. Yeah. So don't sign with a major. Do a deal with an independent. If you're going to do a deal with a label, do a deal with an independent. They license your work and they don't own it. So I feel like that's a more equitable model. They do take 50% of your income, but they take some financial risk too. it's you have to sort of make that decision to see if it's worth it. I find the independent model to be a lot more favorable to artists, and especially like after doing it for 10 years. I mean, owning your masters, it's such a meme, like people say that, but like it's definitely very important to own your work, and especially if it takes off. So
Yeah.
I would say that, like, it's kind of funny because I actually got a music business degree, and by the time I finished, it felt more like a music business history degree, and just because, like, everything moves so quickly, everything changes constantly. So I couldn't sit here and say do this specifically or do that, because like it would be irrelevant in a month. So I like there's so many ways to tackle this, but there's sort of like key stuff that's like hang on to ownership as much as you can, and build an audience and like keep control over it as far as you can.
So I think that's the key, having your own audience, right? Doing things like what you're doing, from your YouTube channel to your Twitter account to your Instagram page to your Patreon to, I don't know, you said you have a stream that you're about to do, right? So
Mm-hmm.
whether it be on Twitch or wherever you do it, right? Just having your own audience that you can leverage, that you can monetize, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and building your own audience, like it just keeps you more in control. I mean, a lot of these platforms don't really give you full access to them, but it's a trade-off,
Yeah.
So like, for example, again, not just to keep railing on Spotify, but I have a couple 100,000 followers or whatever, and I can't reach a single one of them. I can't reach any of my listeners. Spotify every once in a while allows me to message them about tour dates, but like, it's a pretty rare occasion. It needs to be approved by them. So, again, it's sort of, it's not a great kind of situation. So I'd say, like, in general, like, focus on, cutting out the middlemen. And I would say, like, we're actually, I think COVID kind of accelerated this. We're at a very interesting moment where, I mean, people are calling it sort of the creator economy, the Patreons, the OnlyFans, that type of model, I think, is becoming more popular. So I could see things shifting pretty quickly. So the faster you get into that, that seems like, again, just the general right direction,
Yeah, I love it. I kind of want to jump more into like merch. Okay. We're seeing the rise of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, for those who aren't familiar. How do you guys kind of see the role of, I guess, NFTs develop in the music industry? And I'm coming specifically from the perspective of in-person events, right? Obviously canceled because of COVID. It's a reason why we started this meetup, right? And you go to a concert, whatever, a Staples Center, wherever it may be. You buy the clothing, you buy the mugs, you buy all this stuff, this physical memorabilia, right? How do you guys kind of see the integration of NFTs and digital memorabilia playing a role in the music industry? And when artists kind of launch a new song, dropping an NFT to all their listeners, I'm just thinking out loud here, but are you guys thinking about this as well, or what have you saw up recently?
Yeah, I can maybe add a little bit of color from like a product perspective with Audius. I will say I have a slightly contrarian kind of take on this from like a crypto perspective. But again, this all comes back to user experience, and it is tricky, right? Like, I think we can enable NFT primitives and build these in and work with the community to add them to things like Audius, but I don't think you just duct tape it to an existing streaming product, right? I think there's a lot more that has to be done there. And I think there are some interesting ways you can do that, and that kind of turns into a whole kind of product rabbit hole. But I guess kind of from a product perspective, I don't fundamentally think it's an eyeballs problem. And that's what's so interesting here, right? Like, I could go run Reddit ads tomorrow and get this in front of, an NFT in front of 500,000 people on Reddit. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to sell 500,000 NFTs or even like, sell out 50,000 individual pieces of artwork or something like that, right? Like, it's not historically an eyeballs problem, which is what I think crypto seems to think that it is. Like, all of a sudden we have, 800,000 users. It's like, oh, we can add NFTs, and then NFTs will be mainstream. But I don't think that's exactly how this works, right? Like, I think Audius and others are starting to do well almost because we abstract away some of this complexity. And I think it's kind of, at least from a product perspective, kind of almost lazy from us as like engineers and product developers to assume that like, oh, we'll just publish a Medium article and then everybody can go read our 3,000 page or 3,000 word manifesto, understand how NFTs work, then come back, set up MetaMask and start buying NFTs, right? Like, I think those are the kind of things where it's like, okay, like that's probably not going to work. And I don't think it's a matter of just throwing people at the wall until it does. I think we have to kind of be smart, build out interesting product things there, and like enable this in a way that has parallels and kind of like similar mechanisms to what people are potentially already used to, like use metaphors, use similes, like kind of like explain like, oh, this is a trophy that you can put on your profile that says I was, you know, Andre's first listener and therefore I get this piece of artwork, or, you know, something like that. Like people understand trophies, people understand badges. They don't necessarily understand NFTs. And I don't think that you solve that by making them read like Medium posts.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
the NFT space is really interesting. I think I think we're so early, first of all. NFTs in general, I think of them as sort of containers, and it's kind of a terrible name. Like, you know, it's like you say NFT and everybody's like, what are you talking about? You know, but like I think of it as a container, as a scarce container for something. And the way that I've personally approached it is to do, I've sort of tried to do something that sort of already exists in the world, and so I approached it from the perspective of like creating a digital art piece that's, you know, limited to one, basically. Obviously, this is not the model for everything, but I sold it. I collaborated with an artist friend of mine, and we sold it on this platform called Super Rare, which is meant for like this digital art forms. And we actually broke the record, which is actually kind of cool, for the highest price. So that's a very interesting precedent about this. And now all my
what was the price, by the way?
26,000. So for a digital piece of art, which I think is really interesting. So by the way, this is like a custom piece of 3D art that we made. I wrote the music for it, and my friend did the visuals for it. So again, like there's maybe some people that are like, why in the world would somebody pay for that? But clearly somebody did. So I think that sort of proves the value of it, I guess. But anyway, like I think NFTs are, again, it's super early. It's a very interesting space to explore and to experiment with. And I like the idea of applying scarcity to music again. And I think that's something worth exploring. Maybe not as the model for everything, but as an additional, I don't feel like this takes away from anything else. It's just like, what if I want to make a song that's only available to 10 people? Like, why can't I do that? You know, that's antithetical to how we make music now, but I'm just saying I should have that option, right? I think it's interesting. So
right, yeah, I love it. I kind of want to jump to the QA as we wrap up today's session. So for Audius, this one comes from Alula. How does your platform deal with artist development? Super quick. If you guys deal with artist development, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it actually kind of gets back to what we mentioned a little bit earlier, which is like our role is to give tools to artists that they can use how they see fit, right? So a lot of our artists have been able to use those tools to develop really great audiences here, and I think Andre might need to hop off here so we can Forrest and I can kind of finish out the
yeah.
I don't want to keep you from your stream.
No, I was just posting. I was like, I'm going to be a little late, so it's fine. It's fine. It's all good.
We'll wrap up in the next 2 minutes.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So, I think we've tried to really take the approach of wanting to build scalable tools that are self-serve for folks, and do so in a way that is, every artist on Audius is treated the same, right? Like the product does not treat you any differently if you're like a huge artist or you're just someone producing cool stuff in your bedroom, right? Like that kind of equity component, like sort of distribution of ability to distribute content, I guess, is like we just felt that like equity of opportunity was a really important piece of this, and Forrest is actually the one responsible for making most of these tools, so I'm sure he has thoughts also.
Well, I'll just keep it super quick, but I was going to say, in an ideal world, from an artist development perspective, I think people don't have to graduate off of Audius, which is what's so interesting, right? Like you look at a lot of the big folks now that are, headlining shows, or at least were headlining shows, and a lot of them came up on SoundCloud, but then they had to get signed to a major label in order to start, doing stadium tours and things like that. And I think ideally we add in these monetization tools into Audius, and you can become big and become a rock star, but still stay on Audius and not have to sign a label deal. Would be
I
my
love
take.
it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, that's all the time we have today, guys. We had a kick-ass session. Really quick before we leave, Andre, Forrest, Roneil, where can we find all of you? We can start with Andre and work our way down.
Yeah, so I tend to be an early adopter, so I always get the RAC username on every platform. So it's very hard to get 3 letters. It's tough. So yeah, so just RAC on Twitter, whatever, Instagram, whatever thing you prefer.
Great. Forrest?
Yeah, same kind of story. So it's my first and last name, Forrest Browning, on Twitter and Instagram.
Cool. And Roneil?
For me, it's Roneil R on Twitter, so RONEILR. That's where I'm most active. And I also want to mention, I think it's quite funny. I think there's like some like Canadian train system or something that shares the name with RAC. So like I always see Andre like quote tweeting tweets of people being like angry at the like train system, and it's just super funny. The trade-offs of having like a very a super like high profile username, I guess, is that you must get a lot of random spam.
Yeah, so it's the Rabbi Association of Canada is one of them.
The Rabbi Association.
Yes. There's the Royal Automobile Club, which is I think the one you're referring to. It's in the UK.
That's what I'm thinking of. Okay, yeah.
Every time somebody gets stuck on the side of the road, they call like AAA, basically the version of AAA. So they're like, "Why aren't you here?" And I'm always replying, like, "On my way." It comes with the territory. It's all good. I think it's funny. Like,
guys, thank you so much. One last cheers. We had a great discussion. And for everyone that's new to blockchain and Boost, kind of what we do right now, we disperse into our networking session where you guys basically get to meet one another, and we'll disperse to all these colorful tables where you'll be able to bounce from seat to seat and meet some of the coolest people that I've met. And to do so, make sure you have your cameras on, make sure you have your microphones on, or else you'll be ridiculously confused. Okay, so cameras on, microphones on. Let's do it. We'll see you next week. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you.